Good evening. Today is Wednesday, November the 20th, 2024. This is a meeting of the Lunenburg Municipal Building Design Committee. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and will be broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel. The recording of this meeting will be available on the Lunenburg Public Access YouTube channel within 24 hours. The agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at this meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. Public participation is encouraged, and public comments may be welcomed during committee member discussions at the discretion of the chair. We're going to begin this evening with public comments. Do we have any public comments from the board? All right, seeing none. Do we have any public comments from our APDC rep?
None.
And do we have any public comments from the public? Right, seeing none. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So I'm gonna introduce the members of, what we're doing tonight is we have an interview with Taylor and Burns for design services. They also have some of their sub-consultants with us this evening. I'm gonna introduce our team. The format of this is that we will do a hard stop at about 6:15. The members will then, at that point, we will ask everyone associated with Taylor and Burns to drop off the call to give us the opportunity to rank them. Certainly, I can't force you to do that. You can certainly stay on the call, but we will need to do a quick rating, and then that then prompts kind of next steps. So I'm going to do a quick introduction of the team, and then I will turn it over to Mr. Taylor for an introduction of the team that he has with us. We did, prior to this evening, come up with some questions. We have basically 9 questions to go over this evening, and potentially 2, depending on time, so up to 11. We will have some follow-ups to these questions, but again, we are looking at a hard stop at about 6:15. At that point, we're going to start losing our quorum here because a couple of us have another meeting this evening to get to. I'm Michael Ray Jeffries. I'm a member of the Lunenburg Select Board. I'm the vice chair of the Select Board and the chair of the Municipal Building Design Committee. Mr. Blatt, who is the vice chair, is not with us yet this evening. We also have Brian Leighton. Brian is a member of the school committee, and he is the chair of the school committee. We also have Tom Gray, who is with us this evening. He's part of our finance committee and represented on this board as well. We have Mr. Matt Allison, a long-serving member of our planning board. We have Mr. Gregory Roy. Greg Roy is appointed by our moderator. He's our community member. Mr. Roy is also professionally an engineer and has worked on previous building projects related to the schools. And we also have another community member at large, which is Christina Masitis, and Christina doesn't appear to be with us this evening. Mr. Taylor, I'll start with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to meet you all. My name is Robert Taylor. I'm founding principal of Taylor and Burns Architects. I've been in this business for over 40 years as a practicing professional architect and leader of my own firm for 32 years. With me are Marley and Stephen. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
Hey, I'm Stephen Lauder. I've been with Taylor and Burns Architects for I think 3 years now, and I'm going to be acting as a project designer and BIM manager on this project.
Hello, I'm Marley Lynch. I've been with Taylor and Burns for about 2 years, and I will be serving as design support and renderer for this project.
And also with us are our MEP engineers, Ken and Bruce. Will you guys introduce yourselves, please?
Sure. I'm Ken Beck, BLW Engineers, founding principal. We started the company in 1999. We do HVAC, plumbing, fire protection, electrical consulting for construction projects. We are currently about 80 people deep, and we're located in Littleton, Mass, in close proximity to Lunenburg. And I also happen to be a graduate of Lunenburg High School in 1983. Bruce?
Hi, I'm Bruce Gorman. I'm an HVAC design engineer. Been with BLW for a little over 3 years now. And yeah, I live in Leominster, so I'm actually really close to.
Great. So I could say about our firm, you know, we've already made a proposal to you. I don't want to repeat any of that, but we're very excited about this project. I think Lunenburg is a particularly beautiful New England town. The buildings that are the subject of this project are right in the middle of that historic center, and it presents challenges that we see as exactly in our wheelhouse, what we're good at. And so we're very excited about the opportunity that this presents. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Taylor, and thank you as well to Bruce, to Ken, to Marley, and to Stephen for being with us this evening. It's always good to hear first, Ken. We always like former Lunenburg High School graduates. I think that you know, I am one. I know Mr. Allison is one. I'm not sure. I actually don't know if Brian and Tom are. I thought Greg was from Littleton, but but we always like to see that, and then as well as Bruce, you know, and having people that are close by to understand the community, understand the region that we're in. You know, I think most people who are from Leominster and Fitchburg, you know, understand what Lunenburg is in the region, who we like to be at least. So we're gonna go ahead and get started this evening. I have the questions pulled up on my side if I can find them again. So give me a moment. Yep, here we go. So the way that we're going to proceed is I will ask all of the initial questions. If we have follow-ups, any member can jump in with the follow-up before we move on. So the first question, most of these questions are targeted toward Taylor and Burns, but certainly if there's an opportunity for anyone else to jump in here, please feel free to. First question, is the firm familiar with the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties? And can you provide any examples of projects where those standards were applied in the past 10 years?
Great question. The Secretary of Interior standards are, yeah, we're very familiar with them. In fact, the full title of that is the standards, I think, for treatment of preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, and reconstruction or something like that. And what's great about it is that those terms are often used synonymously by the general public, but they actually are disambiguated by the Secretary of Interior with precise recommendations of what to do in the case of preservation, for example, which is maintaining the historic integrity, character, materials of a historic building, and versus, say, rehabilitation, which is to sometimes put a new use into an old building that requires significant change, but one tries to do that following the recommendations of the Secretary of Interior to minimize any disruption of the historic fabric of the building. And it was a guidance for us in our project at Trinity Episcopal Church in Concord, which was a listed, actually a campus of like four buildings, two of them listed historic buildings. And we were using used those guidelines to preserve a chapel from 1850, and in the parish house, we made a significant addition, and we did so, I think, in a way that was complementary to the historic buildings that utilize scale and character materials that was appropriate for constructing new next to old, and not creating any confusion as to what was new and old. And those are guidelines, recommendations that are in that the Secretary of the Interior guidelines. So yeah, that was a project that we completed just about 10 years ago, actually. Does that answer the question? I hope.
Do we have any follow-up to that question from any member? All right, seeing none. Can you talk about, you mentioned this in your answer, but can you talk about the process for the design of the Trinity Episcopal Church Parish House?
Well, it's hard to capture that in 5 minutes because it's a project that took multiple years. But the Trinity Episcopal Church has a campus of 4 buildings. One was a cottage built in 1820, the Elwell Cottage, a listed building. One was a chapel built about 1850 by the Alcotts, and it was those 2 buildings worked together as a kind of parsonage and chapel. And then in the 1930s, they built a parish house to accommodate the approximately 100 people who could fit in the chapel. And then in the 1960s, they built a big church addition that could accommodate 600 people. And by the time they got around to talking to us in the around 2008, they needed a new parish house, one that would be welcoming, provide social fellowship space for the 500 people who would sometimes show up for funerals or major events at the church. And so we had to find space on this campus to accommodate a major expansion. And at first, we were going to demolish the 1930s parish house and the 1820 cottage. And the Historic District Commission said, you're not going to do that. And in fact, this was the church wanted to do that. They didn't like owning this 180-year-old building, the cottage. But it was clear to us that if we tried to schedule that for demolition, we would not get approval for the project from the Historic District Commission, and we would make enemies in the neighborhood. So instead, we began to pursue a process of moving the 1820 cottage about 100 feet to new foundations. And that was also discouraged by the Historic District Commission. And it was also a very costly move to, build new foundations and move a structure over there. So we just had to get creative and shoehorn the new parish house into the site in a way that did no harm to any of the listed protected buildings. And I think the built results indicate that we pulled that off. It was, not simple. I think we met with the Historic District Commission more than 20 times, and the design evolved quite a bit from the beginning to the end. But we succeeded in meeting the church's program and also protecting the historic legacy of Concord, Massachusetts.
Right. Does any member have a follow-up to this question?
I do, Michael Ray.
Mrs. Stonebridge?
Was there any real compromise in terms of cost, expenses? You said it was difficult to do the preservation. What was, and your client said, oh, let's tear that building down. So when you finally got around to saying to them, well, we're going to have to satisfy the Concord Historic folks, or this project isn't going to move forward. What were some of the things that your client was concerned about with moving forward to save those buildings? And can you give a specific example as to how you might have overcome some of your clients' concerns with regards to costs, with regards to functionality of this old structure?
Mm-hmm. Well, there were 2 old structures that were listed. The 1850 chapel was, at the heart of their mission, near and dear to them. And that was clearly the subject of careful preservation when we had to, for example, introduce sprinkler system into that building. The 1820 cottage was a building that they had pretty much abandoned years ago, and it was falling into a condition of disrepair or, you know, unoccupiable space. But we were able to indicate to them that, one, it could serve as a construction trailer in the interim. And so the contractor set up shop in that house. And then at the conclusion of the parish house addition, the cottage was renovated to be the home for church clergy. And you know, not the chief priest at that church, but one of the secondary clergy people could live in that house. And so we made lemonade out of lemons by showing that it could be used as a construction trailer and then also as a home for their employees. And so it did save money. The difficulty was simply building a brand new building within several feet of this fairly delicate wooden structure that was nearly 200 years old and doing no damage to it during all of those construction operations. And we had a CF Floyd, very good contractors, who pulled it off. So good team.
All right, thank you. Any additional follow-up? All right, can you talk about the process for the design of the roof for the Cassidy Field House? And this was one of the projects that was in the response to the RFP.
Yeah, in fact, we were going to show some slides. And Marley, do you still have those Cassidy Fieldhouse slides?
I do.
So
I can share
yeah.
those.
Cassidy Fieldhouse was a 1930s comfort station in a city of Boston park built by Mayor Curley. It was one of like 25 across the city and the only one that remained in existence. And so the Parks Department wanted to keep it, even though it was in pretty rotten condition. Go ahead and share screen if you can, Marley. The roof of that was slate, original slate, and you can see the condition of it there, completely covered with moss and on the north side. And slates were missing and the flashing had most of it had been torn off. The roof leaked, the sheathing underneath had rotted out in many places, and there was no insulation. And to renovate this building, we needed to clearly re-roof it and also create an insulation barrier to meet the energy code. We needed to replace the sheathing, new ice and water shield all over it. And to insulate it, just create a tempered or warm attic for the mechanical systems. And so after taking on all of that, the city of Boston decided that they couldn't afford slate as the new roofing material. And they decided to use in its place asphalt shingles. And do you have the next photograph? Yeah, so there's the renovated building with asphalt shingle roofing, which looks from a distance a lot like slate, but if you got close to it, you would realize it's asphalt shingles. We decided explicitly not to use plastic, fake slate. We wanted to be honest about what these materials actually were. And the cities decided also that it was a reversible decision. If at some later time someone decided the Cassidy Fieldhouse really needed a slate roof, you could always do that. So that was the decision, the thought process that led to that. Thanks, Marley. You could close the screen.
So in case there are more things to share, Marley, I will keep you as the co-host for a little bit here. Do we have any follow-up on that question? All right. How would you describe your vision to retain the historic character of both the Ritter Building and the Town Hall while making them more functional for and usable by the town?
I don't really have a vision at this point because we don't know you well enough, nor know the buildings well enough. I'm not the only person uncomfortable with these vision questions, but I would say that the first thing we would do would be to understand the patient, really do a careful evaluation of the two buildings so that we knew what was truly historic about them rather than, later additions or renovations that have occurred in the lifespan of the building, and what was the condition of those components, and then begin to understand what kind of new functions you wanted to put into them. And a guiding principle is do no harm, to try not to do anything to historic buildings that would detract from their historic integrity and character. So that would be, our kind of operating principles in addressing these buildings. I don't really have a vision about what they should become. I think that is something that needs to evolve in time as we understand the buildings and the proposed programs for them.
Okay, do we have any follow-up to this? All right, the next question is kind of getting a little into the engineering, and so feel free to tap into some of your partners here for this question. How do you bring historic buildings into ADA compliance and modern safety standards without losing the historical feel of the building?
That's not a simple answer. It's different every time because every building is different. As you may know, ADA is it's in the Massachusetts Building Code as the AAB, but it's in the United States Federal Code as a civil right that buildings should be welcoming and accessible to people of all abilities. And so we try to follow that principle and also respect the historic character of buildings. And sometimes the two principles are at odds with each other, and you have to work through a solution, using our creativity and our wits and our experience to deal with a situation that we find ourselves in. It's really, there's no overall simple solution to that. It varies from project to project.
Any follow-up to this? All right. I think for the next question, I think this is probably going mostly to Ken and Bruce on this one. What are some of the ways you work to incorporate energy efficiency and sustainability into historic structures? And I don't know, Robert, if that's you or if that's them, but
well, first I'm going to turn it to Stephen Lauder, who's our sustainability guru in the office. Stephen, what do you say to that?
Yeah, thank you, Robert. I'm sure Bruce and Ken will have plenty to say about the HVAC, mechanical, and some more non-invasive methods that would certainly be good for this. But just looking from the architectural standpoint and looking at the town center of Lunenburg and keeping that historical qualities and the characteristics is the most important. And then first we look at with the historical boards in the towns and everything and look at experts to identify a plan and look at those features that's going to be minimizing the alterations that we're doing to the exterior of your buildings while also maximizing the energy efficiency on the inside. The plans like Robert had talked about at Cassidy Fieldhouse often involve weatherization and focusing on the building's envelope, where we're preventing water and air infiltration and things like that to bring everything up into compliance with modern energy codes and still preserving that physical characteristics of the building. And now I'm sure, Ken, you have plenty to say here.
Yeah, so I guess sustainability has been the word of the day for the past 3, 4, 5 years now. So almost every project that we work on, whether it's a historic structure or a new project, that is the focus of what we do for most of our projects and for most of our clients. The biggest thing for a historical building like this is we're really trying to put a lot of things into this building that it was never meant to have. So we're shoving fire protection, fire alarms, tel data, cooling, heating, ventilation into a structure that they could never foresaw that it would need. So one of the first things we need to do as a team is really get to understand the building and what the limitations of the building might be and how that might affect the systems that we want to apply to the building. And fortunately, the newer sustainable systems, all electric systems, a lot of those systems and their technology have lent themselves very well to these limited invasive building type, limited invasiveness into the buildings. There's, smaller pipes, smaller ductwork, great efficiencies, and, controllability. Temperature controls, automatic controls, we can do a lot with that to, increase our efficiency with whatever system we decide on. And also we'll be looking at energy recovery, day-night setbacks, demand control, ventilation, a lot of low-hanging fruit that will increase the sustainability and efficiency of the building. But we need to get to know the buildings and understand what they can accommodate. One system that might fit one building might not fit the other. So we're going to do our due diligence and make sure we present the appropriate systems for evaluation, and have a recommendation, and coordinate with the town of Lunenburg as well to make sure they understand the systems that we're proposing and have an agreement on where we're going towards the final design.
All right, thank you. Is there any follow-up to that question from the committee? All right.
I go ahead one, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Roy.
I had one follow-up on that. When it comes to energy systems and energy and HVAC systems, I'm always concerned with long-term operation and maintenance costs.
Yep.
And I wondered if you could talk briefly about how you might how your firm factors that in when you're choosing equipment and putting together, systems in buildings like this.
Yeah,
as you're walking clients through that process.
Yeah, so that's actually a good question, and I wish I had that summary table that we do for a lot of our projects. We just did we're involved in the JV Fletcher library renovation project over there in Groton, Westford, Mass.
Yep.
And that's a historic building, and we actually spent a lot of time evaluating 4 different systems. So we not only looked at the operating costs, we looked at the maintenance costs, and also the life cycle costs of the buildings. And also and then we also looked at the estimated construction costs, the associated rebates that we could get from Mass Save or the IRA, and factored that all into a summary table that it presented all those costs across the line of the system, so that we could have a good discussion about not only first costs, but life cycle costs, and rebate costs. The Inflation Reduction Act has some stuff in there that is really beneficial. It's interesting because we looked a long time at geothermal on that project, because the Inflation Reduction Act actually offers 30% of the total cost of the HVAC system as a grant, not only as a rebate, but as a grant. So when we looked at the lowest cost first cost system and then the geothermal costs with that grant, the geothermal actually ended up being a cheaper cost to install. The problem with that Westford had, though, is you don't get that grant until the system was installed. So there was a period that they would have to float that money until they got the grant, which was kind of hard for them to do in the situation they were in, with already having the money bonded. So they couldn't come up with that. The grant was actually $1.4 million. And the geothermal system was $1.25 million more than the lowest system. So it would actually have been $150,000 cheaper, but they couldn't find a way to float day one cost to final cost. But that's something we would propose to do on this project as well, is present all that data so that you are looking at it with us and we can all make an informed decision on which is the best system for the town of Lunenburg. In terms of, operation, what your budget is, and how you're going to maintain it as well.
Great, thank you.
Do we have any additional follow-ups? All right. What is your process? And again, this is kind of an engineering question. What is your process for dealing with unexpected structural issues in older buildings that may involve updating outdated wiring, foundation issues, or materials requiring special handling like HVAC? I'm going to say that again because it's kind of a lengthier question here. So what is your process for dealing with unexpected structural issues in older buildings that may involve updating outdated wiring, foundation issues, or materials requiring special handling?
Right. It's a complicated question, but the first line of defense when renovating or updating an old building is to carry a robust contingency for the unknowns you don't know about yet, but sooner or later they're going to be found out. And that is you just need that as a parachute, as a lifesaver going into a project like this. That should be carried, I think, up into the point of bidding almost, like a 10% contingency for things that may arise. And then through design, it's important to try to discover as much as you can about what's hidden in the walls of an old building. Sometimes that requires some, investigative demolition, cutting holes to look into cavities, uncovering as much as you can during design so that you can include the work in the bid documents so that it's clear to the contractor that they need to do work on whether it be foundations or wiring or plumbing. I would turn it back over to Ken or Bruce as to the kinds of systems that.
Yes. Yeah, from MEP FP's point of view, I don't think that there's anything in those buildings that we'll be wanting to reuse. I think everything that is there is old enough and of a different system type than we would plan to use for the renovation. I'm assuming that all the utilities are going to be upgraded in some way. I'm sure the electrical service is not going to support what we're planning to do with these buildings, and there's no fire protection now, so we'll be bringing that service in, and then we'll have to evaluate the water and the sanitary services to see what those look like right now. But I'm assuming that depending on what we do here, we're probably adding fixtures and more load to the plumbing, so it may need to be renovated anyway. But if we were planning to reuse something like the sanitary line, we would want to camera that, before we plan to reuse it, so that we're not relying on a sanitary pipe that may have tree roots growing through it. So that's something we will do our due diligence in terms of evaluating during the design and make sure we're taking every effort to eliminate those possibilities as much as we can.
All right, any follow-up from the committee on this? All right, so we have about 9-10 minutes left here, so we're gonna try to crank through these last two questions and provide some space for any final comments. We know we haven't heard from Bruce yet, so we definitely want to hear something from him in this. Question number 8, how do you include involvement from committees and community members within your design process to make sure that alignment with the needs and vision of the town is achieved?
Well, we want to meet with you. We want to talk with the people of Lunenburg to the extent that your schedule allows. Typically that's in the format of focus groups. Not everybody all at once, but group of people who might be interested in a particular issue. And we use very accessible standard English and good visuals to make the issues clear and hopefully self-evident. Marley can show you some of the kinds of things that we do. Marley will be our graphics specialist on this project. Marley, you want to talk about these?
Sure. Yeah, so as Robert mentioned, we use computer-aided design and building information modeling to create both two-dimensional and three-dimensional visuals for all of our projects. Shown here are some images you might recognize from the proposal, including the exterior rendering of the Trinity Episcopal Church, which includes the 1850 chapel on the left, the 1820 Elwell Cottage on the right, and the proposed and then built addition in the middle. And then below, you'll see a section perspective that allows you to kind of see into those spaces and get a sense of how they're utilized. In addition to those, we also utilize physical modeling if the project sees that that might be fit. And while we will tailor our community engagement to your town, specifically for this project in particular, we utilized formal presentations and a structured set of meetings to discuss project goals and show these visualizations. And in addition to that, we also were involved in workshop events, facilitated discussions, surveys, and as Robert mentioned, focus groups to really understand the needs and desires of the community members and project steering committee.
All right, thank you. Do we have any follow-up? Okay. I will offer comment here. So one of the things that was highlighted in the RFP is that, this committee has been meeting for several years. We've worked with a previous engineering company. In our community, we have what is an old school, we call it the TC Passios, or the TCP, easiest language to use. And so, our initial charge was to look at turning that building into municipal school and community uses. And in that process, the architectural team that we were working with, met with all of the key stakeholders. We had multiple meetings with members of the community to gather information about needs. This committee kind of reassessed all those needs and pushed back, made some modifications, made some changes. So, you guys are coming into this process because where we landed was that renovation was roughly 30 million. And I think that our mindset going into it was that it was going to be probably half that. And so there were a couple lessons learned in that process. Number one is that, cost estimation needs to occur throughout the process. And that way we don't get a sticker shock at the very end. When we make changes or modifications to the discussion, to the plans, we certainly need to be aware of those cost implications as they occur. And the second thing is, if you spend $30 million on that building, it still doesn't address what is now our town hall and Ritter building, and can't possibly be the most cost-effective solution forward. And so, a lot of us engaged in years of getting to this point. So I think that where we're at now, and the biggest summary is we're repackaging. We're taking a lot of that data that we've already collected, and we're repackaging into what is now, our oldest buildings, our town hall, our Ritter building, and what we're calling an annex or a new town hall. So I think a lot of that community engagement, because of the extensive work that we've already done, again, I think that's going to probably make this process a little easier. But I know that was noted in the RFP that we're taking new lens to what we've been working on for a while. The last question that we have is, what do you bring in terms of strategies for keeping the project at budget and at schedule, given the possible complexities associated with historic renovations?
Great question. I'm gonna take schedule first. I think that the important part about schedule, the important thing to schedule is to identify key dates, key deliverables. You've already done that. That's very helpful to us. And then we develop a work plan about how we're going to hit those milestones. And then we work the plan. It sounds simple, but it's a pretty methodical approach, and utilizing that, we've never missed a deadline in 32 years of practice. As for budget, we practice value design. And by that, I want to distinguish that from so-called value engineering. We like to understand at the outset, as clearly as we can, the relative cost of different approaches, and then to take estimates of probable construction costs repeatedly, sequentially, as the project develops in design, and not introduce at the beginning concepts that are obviously too expensive and have to get cut at the end through value engineering, which is a demoralizing kind of process. So that, that's basically our approach to cost management and time management during the development of a project. I do want to, Bruce, I'd love to hear from you about how BLW approaches cost control with MEP systems.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got the same style. We've got great relations with a lot of vendors, local vendors. So we're able to stay on top of prices for all of the equipment that we would be scheduling and selecting, and trying to keep it equipment that's going to be have lower lead time, so we're able to get the equipment quicker to not slow down the projects at all. That's one of our huge things that we have. And then also, Ken and I actually worked on another town hall where we were able to do a lot of rebates and stuff through Mass Save. So that's something that's really huge when you go from really old equipment to really new equipment. The incentives are really there. So we can use those rebates as well to cut costs and help with costs.
All right. One of the things I can tell Brian's transitioning probably from wherever he's at to get over to the schools for this meeting. So I appreciate the interview. I want to give an opportunity and a little off script here. If there's any final follow-up, any final questions that any member would like to ask of anyone. So I'll just kind of go around the horn here for that. Greg. And then I'm coming to Tony next, and then Matt and Tom and Brian.
I had some questions written out, but I think we touched them all on them all. So I appreciate the opportunity to interview the team here, and yeah, thank you. I'm good.
Thank you, Tony.
What's been the bidding climate like for projects that you've been working on here more recently? We saw prices take a monumental leap, as we were exiting the pandemic. What's your sense for where things are now? Are we seeing normal increases in bidding, or are we still at that hyper increase level?
What we've been seeing is the rate of escalation is slowing down. It's considerably. The pandemic spikes have basically gone away. The price of plywood is kind of settled down. One of the major drivers of construction cost is the price of fuel. To power all of the equipment, the trucks, the deliveries, that has gone down. And all of that signals that the cost of construction should settle down as well. That's not to say that prices of plywood are going to go lower than they were in 2019. I haven't seen any sign of that, but who knows? And it's largely determined by market forces, which are quite local. What's happening in Eastern Massachusetts is different than what's happening in Florida or wherever. So it's the bids that we've opened most recently were pretty much in line with our estimates, because our estimates had included pretty good contingencies for escalation, which we would, when we get to the point of bidding this project, we would be looking at escalation factors. I mean, that's what we use, an independent cost estimator who tells us what to use for those factors. People think of them as markups, but they're not really. It's more like future-proofing your construction estimate to accommodate for changes going forward.
And I would just add that, you know, what we find on the mechanical electrical side tends to be whether there's proper planning in terms of for lead time and equipment and for the construction of the project. So, you know, just for instance, you know, working on a boiler project and getting it out to bid in February to be done over the summertime is your prices are going to be higher because, you know, people already have their work. So I think a lot of times, you know, making sure we you know, plan the project properly and have the proper you know, construction periods, it helps a lot as well.
Mr. Allison, do you have any final questions?
No, excuse me. I'd just like to thank everybody for your time. I was very pleased with all your answers, and apparently I'm actually really looking forward to working with you folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allison. Mr. Gray? All right, and Mr. Leighton, I know he's walking into a meeting here. All right. I want to thank you as well for being here tonight. I know it's a little unusual to have so many people as part of the hiring process. I think that, you know, what we've discovered in our experience, and by no means a criticism of any particular individual, but municipalities do construction all the time. And I think that we all know that what happens too often is that, you know, the team that we kind of get the marketing team that shows up to this interview process, and it's not really the folks you really work with. And so there's a little bit of bait and switch that always happens, or not always, but that sometimes happens. And so in this process, it was important to us to see the people we're actually going to be working with. That was something that was really, I think, important to us, given some of our, again, past experience as a municipality. So it really, for us, has been wonderful. I can speak for myself, but I know we put it in the RFP as a requirement of how we are evaluating. It was really important to see the skill sets here tonight. I know that going through an interview process and having to be here on an evening is never too much fun, but I do want to thank the expertise. You know, this really, I agree with Mr. Allison. I think that this has been a really phenomenal interview on how I see it. Any final words, Mr. Taylor, or anyone from your team, before we ask you to depart for the evening? And thank you again for your time.
Well, yeah, I would say Chairman Jeffries and everybody else on the team, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the chance to visit with you this evening and talk about our work and discuss your project. And we really look forward to working with you as well. It's
Great.
a really exciting project.
All right, thank you all. We'll give it about 30 seconds, then we'll get started with this next part. So again, thank you all for being here. Marley, I'm gonna have to take co-host back from you. So
Go ahead.
Good night,
It's fun
everyone.
to have power. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Have a good night.
I'm going to share my screen now. Actually, before I do, and I know again we have a hard stop here, so let me not share. How do I get out of sharing? All right. Anyone want to give any just general kind of comments about how we think that went?
I can. I was extremely impressed. I thought that you know, the architect lead there clearly has immense experience, but I was impressed by his staff too. Not only do they seem like they have good, I think they're likely to be very strong technically just because of their age. That's, to be quite honest with you. But they're very articulate as well. So, which can sometimes be rare for folks starting out in their career. And then, so I don't have any qualms with the architect, but also, one thing that you often don't get is a very articulate and good MEP consultant. And I was really impressed with the MEP consultant. So, and that's really important for me. You know, the systems of the building. I guess that's spoken like a good civil engineer. You know, the systems of the building is important. It's important how it looks, but it's also important if we can't operate it and we can't do it efficiently over a long period of time and maintain it, it's becomes a burden. So I personally was very impressed.
Mr. Gray.
I I wrote down some notes. I was very I don't know a lot about I haven't done a lot of this before, so I don't have a lot of past experience on dealing with these things, but they seem to be saying all the right things. They were talking about getting, working with focus groups. They were talking about rebates and, using to keep the costs down, staying on budget, staying on time. The whole thing about doing was it the during the time they were going to do some minor demolition to get better information about what's behind the wall or what's here and what's there. I thought all that are things that are good things. I don't know if that's just the basic table stakes, but it was to me something that I had, and I do agree with Greg that they were all very articulate. They've probably been through this a lot before, but they seemed very knowledgeable, and I think some of the answers that they gave about some of the building, and that they weren't saying tear down the building. It was the actual client that wanted to. So I think it overall is very good.
If I can hit Brian, I know he has a meeting that starts right now that I gotta start heading to. Brian, any thoughts that you want to share on how that went?
Yeah, I thought it went well. I would agree with what everybody else said. I think they had good answers, especially with regards to the roof change and the tear down concerns. I thought they answered those well. And yeah, when they didn't know the answers yet, they kind of said that too. So that was good too. I like that. I thought it went really well.
All right, and Brian, just for my own benefit, when I get to the high school, the door is unlocked.
Yeah, yeah.
And you guys, the room kind of toward the cafeteria.
Take a left, yep, towards the cafeteria. Yeah.
All right, I'll see you guys soon.
See you soon.
Mr. Allison, and then I'm going to hit you, Tony. Mr. Allison, I know you already kind of made some comments, but I just want to caption them. Any thoughts?
Oh, I probably did make comments out of turn, whatever, but no, I was prepared not to be impressed. However, they overcame that, and I was quite impressed. I did like the lead architect, his experience. He was very well spoken, and he answered all the questions that I didn't ask, which I also thought was important. And then also the sub-consultants, their familiarity with each other, their previous projects, they're local. I think this is a very good, seemingly working team, and I'm pleased.
And Tony.
I think they're a good firm. I think we hit their schedule, at a sweet spot. I think they were looking for work, and I think that we'll get good support out of them as a result of that. I have a question. Maybe Greg, you could answer this one. Did they ever tell us who their structural engineer was? We know who the MEP is, and we know that they hire a cost estimating firm. But I can't remember in the proposal saying anything about a structural engineer, and that will be important, especially for town hall. Did you see that?
I didn't see that. No.
So,
Yeah,
Michael Ray, when you go back to them, that's a question. It'd be nice to know who their structural engineer is going to be and what experience they've had with old wood frame buildings like Town Hall is. And then the one thing that I do really like is that they're going to hire professional cost estimators. That one of those cost estimators is actually working on the Ritter Memorial Building right now, because that's going to create the credibility that we're going to need to sell this project to the town. If we don't have a good estimate and there isn't, the right kind of, numbers on the table, one where we can stand up in front of town hall or at town meeting and say, this is credible, we'll never get this through the town process. So that estimating consultant is, I think, an excellent thing for us to have.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, I'm going to share my screen real quick to knock out our ratings, and then again we got to disconnect here. So I know, Greg, you got to run, So let me share, what I'm going to share is the RFP document. So what we need to evaluate here are the reference checks. And so Tony, you and I performed those reference checks. Did you have a municipal entity that you checked in with? I don't recall.
I had the school system at in Berkeley, Massachusetts. I had
Okay.
the school superintendent there.
All right. I have the
And,
town.
that project is going out for bid. Hopefully, it's going out for bid based on a vote that was taken last Thursday.
How would you rate, again, looking at the ratings here, how would you evaluate those reference checks that you performed?
Oh, I'd say that they were highly advantageous.
Okay. And I would concur that that was exactly the feedback I got, and I also had a municipal entity. Staffing. So as far as the interview goes for proposed staffing, these were our criteria. And I think for sure we're somewhere in this range, but we just got to go around the horn. So acceptable, at least product leads part of the interview and is a designated representative at 50% of the meetings. I think what we heard tonight is that Mr. Taylor will be at 100% of the meetings. And then we also listed for acceptable qualified staff, project leader with adequate personal recommendations. Most personally identified proposer are proven to possess acceptable level of municipal building design and construction administration experience and and performance as we go there. So advantageous, they're 75% highly qualified staff, highly advantageous. They're going to be at all the meetings, highly qualified staff, and outstanding personal recommendations. We did see everyone's resumes. How would you evaluate how the team members from Taylor and Burns were? Would you say that they were acceptable, advantageous, unacceptable, highly advantageous? What are we thinking?
I'd give him advantageous. This is Tom.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I would too. I only just because I think they have they have some staff on the architectural side, at least, that isn't maybe as experienced.
Okay.
But I don't have any questions about their ability to do the work, but I'd probably put them in the advantageous column.
All right, Matt.
I'd say advantageous as well, and I also want to answer Tony's question, that Ken Beck, he's a structural engineer, so he might be the MEP guy. I just looked at the previous submission, but yeah, advantageous, I would agree.
All right, Tony.
Advantageous, and I had the same point of view as Greg. A couple of, I mean, they're the lead architect and the supporting architect. They're not long in the tooth. You know, they've only been in this business for 3 or 4 years at the most for the lead, for Stephen, and Marley's only been there for a couple of years. I think that I didn't realize that BLW was as big as it is. That didn't come through in the proposal. But to have an 80-person, mechanical, electrical, plumbing consultant, that's a pretty good sized firm. So they got some experience there.
Yeah. Yeah, I've worked with other people from BOW, but not the people that were there today. For the last area we have to evaluate is the staffing for sub-consultants, and do we think that they were inadequate or negative? Sub-qualified sub-consultants, they seem highly qualified, or were they highly qualified with relevant experience, such as municipal buildings? How do we evaluate the sub-consultants that were on the call with us?
Would that be like Ken and Bruce?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say they're highly advantageous. I thought they were very good.
Me too.
I agree.
Yep, me too.
All right, I'm with you guys on that one. All right. Thank you. Let me stop screen sharing. All right, so I have to get running here. I know Greg has to get running here. The final things, just real quick. I'm seeing if we have any time, any availability on Monday for a 45-minute plus, potentially plus, to do the space needs, take another look at that. I know we're getting into Thanksgiving week, so I just wanted to see if we have any availability Monday at 5:30 to meet.
Monday at planning board,
What time is your planning board, Matt?
6 o'clock.
All right.
Yeah,
Monday's
and
night.
I might be at that planning board meeting. So I think I can give you a half hour. That's about it.
All right. I want to take what I can get, even if it's 30 minutes. We can always figure out when we can meet next. Tom?
Yeah, I have a meeting that ends at 5, so I could be there.
All right, Tony?
I'm available.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna post for 30 minutes then. I'll check in with the other members, see if they can be available. We just got to get this process going. One of the things I want to do at that kickoff meeting with them is be able to, preferably before that, give them kind of that updated space needs assessment, or at least the information we know to be true at that point. We can continue to work on getting that to them. We know certain things to be true, right? And so I think it might be helpful just to kind of scroll through that. All right, any final, let's just, I know we got to run here. Any final comments here broadly? I don't have public comments, but let's just say any public comments here this evening from any of us, any final thoughts?
Just thank you for all the legwork that you've done.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, it's good. I think I was concerned that we only had one candidate, but I think we might have caught lightning in a bottle here. They seem like a very, very good candidate. I mean, seriously, I'd be very surprised if they didn't. I mean, I've interviewed a lot of these people on other, but I'd be very surprised if they didn't emerge as one of the top candidates. They're a very good candidate, in my opinion, even if they had other competitors. So,
yeah, I agree. I agree. All right, it is 6:34. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, I will second that. And so let's roll call this one. Mr. Allison.
Aye.
Aye for myself, Mrs. Scullenbrini.
Aye.
Mr. Gray.
Aye.
Mr. Roy.
aye.
All right, thank you guys. I'll send out the information for our quick meeting on Monday, and then we'll look to meet again in December the 2nd.
Thank you.
All right,
Thanks.
have a great-
Take care.
Everybody.